Hey everybody, I hope everybody has had a good week so far. My name is Madison, and I chose to do a video reflection for discussion number 7. So, for this module, we were tasked with learning more about gender identity, expression, and orientation. Honestly, I felt like I struggled to fully understand sexual identity just because it's something I've only experienced and perceived in one absolute, maybe not perceived. I know it was different for other people, but in my own experience, it's been, pretty default. I feel like sexual identity is something I have almost been taught to not acknowledge for several reasons, but ultimately because that could be found rude or offensive. And I feel like I've shied away from the topic due to lack of understanding and leaving me to kind of see it as, you know, absolutes from my experience instead of kind of like fluent and complex. So I filled out the gender unicorn, obviously reflecting my personal experience in absolutes. And it was, gender identity, female, woman, girl, gender expression, feminine, sex assigned at birth, female, physically and emotionally attracted to men. Um, but I just wasn't getting anything out of, the assignment. And I knew that there had to be more to it. So I called one of my coworkers over just to go through it with me. So she worked through the assignment with me and kind of brought it to a completely different light than I originally had when I was filling it out. Some examples that I remember is her masculine gender expression example of sprawling out after a long day of work. That's not technically ladylike or woman appropriate, maybe, or feminine energy, or wearing comfortable men's clothing to go to sleep, something like that. Another example that kind of changed my perspective was she gave the example of having really emotional conversations or moments with other women that, maybe you couldn't have with a man, or a man wouldn't be able to relate to the same. So those were all good examples that kind of just pointed out that, it's complex, fluid, and here are examples even you can relate to where you've experienced that complexity, basically. So this obviously did really enhance my understanding of sexual expression, identity, and orientation, and allowed me to break away from perceiving everything in just such absolutes. I think the biggest takeaway for practice that I read from the text was that a student's sexual identity and their social group identity aren't always the same, and they don't have to be the same. It kind of just made me think of the example of, like, a football player, a very masculine maybe role that they play or whatever coming out or something like that, how sometimes people are shocked or whatever. They don't have to, it doesn't all have to align, basically. But at the same time, I think that did reinforce my professional value of just providing the absolute best service I can to anyone and everyone. It's not a matter of any identity, really. If you come to my office and you need help, like, I'm here to help and I want to find a way to help you. So I guess in some ways that kind of takes me back to my original practice of avoiding making any assumptions. At the end of the day, I would stick up for anyone being mistreated or harmed due to like a sexual identity, or if, like, they needed support because of that, I would absolutely provide that support. But otherwise, it just isn't my business and it isn't my place to make an assumption or comment on at all. But reading through the text, another thing that stood out is that, comments can sometimes be made or whatever. And so just being sure to reinforce a culture of, like, you shouldn't make that assumption. We don't know that, or, whatever that may be. In other ways, I think that this all helped me relate to different identities, like I kind of mentioned before, and just understand how sexual identity, expression, and orientation is fluid and complex. So you may see something this way, but that doesn't truly mean they identify this way, or vice versa, whatever. So it's better not to make those assumptions. Yeah, so I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say, hearing about y'all's experiences, and yes, thank you guys.